for having me. Can you hear me okay? Pretty good. Okay. Let's start with a question. What is the fastest running land animal in the world? Everybody knows the answer. The answer is a cheetah. It's not actually about whether you know the answer, it's about how you answer the question. It's about whether you are confident in your answer or whether you are doubting yourself as you answer. There's two kinds of people. Those that say cheetah and those that, cheetah? So here's another one. What is the longest running land animal? The answer is man. Human beings run for longer, and they run without any kind of rest or anything at all, longer than anyone. It's the reason we're alive today, our endurance. It's the one thing that kept us different from everyone else. There's a thing from way back when called persistence hunting, when we had no tools, when we had nothing, when we had no other advantage, when we had no ability to be able to kill any of our food with spears or anything like that, we outran our prey to death. And some people still do that in rural Africa, outrunning their prey because animals can't sweat in a lot of cases, so they can't cool down. Eventually, they just collapse. Why is that important? Because it's what they call an environmental pressure. Pressure is like a forge, right? And it transforms things that are put inside of it. If you're a metal and you get put in a forge, one of two things happens. One, you become a weapon, or two, you get destroyed. So that's what I'm going to try to help you do today. Become a weapon or be destroyed. I'm going to try to get you to do that by giving you 3 pieces of advice in kind of a story-like fashion. Part 1. This used to be our environment. Savanna, a forest, a mountain, or a plain, not the place we are in today. And that means a lot of things, but one of the primary differences that it meant is that we had to learn something when we were a child, and we had this ability to learn it when we were a child, our brain was meant to learn it. And we absorbed all that knowledge, and then all that knowledge stayed true until the day that we died. Nothing changed inside of our environment during that time. It's the exact opposite of what happens now. Right now, everything changes constantly. Something you learned yesterday is no longer true. Something you learned when you were a child is definitely no longer true in a lot of cases, but our brains, in the meantime, have not adapted. They're the same as they were 1 million years ago, and they're telling us, don't worry, what you know is true, and it will always stay true, but it's wrong. And adapt or die used to be true too. If we were wrong about something, we died. So most of the people that are alive were the people that were right, but that's not the case anymore. Now you have a lot of people still alive because nobody dies, giving you bad advice. Here's a piece of advice. Jack Welch said it when he was running GE and turned that huge company around. He said, if you're not number 1 or number 2 in a category, get out of that category. But I have another piece of advice for you that might be better in this day and age. If you're not number 1 or number 2 in a category, create your own category. Do something different. Nietzsche would say, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Well, sure, but that's not always true either, because what was once young becomes old, what was flexible becomes rigid and solid and breaks. So the old tree is meant to be cut down because it makes the best wood. The young tree is flexible, it isn't cut down, and it stays alive. Try to stay young. The human body is meant to be this way too. Everything that we get as a pressure actually it harms us to a certain degree, but it also helps us. One of the greatest examples of this is the sun. The sun is radiation, and if there's enough of it that gives it to us, we die. But if with a little bit of sun, it's actually good for us. It creates vitamin D, which is necessary to survive. That's the same reason that when you're in a gym, if you lift a lot of weight, you break your back. But if you lift a little bit of weight, you get progressively stronger one day after another. It's a biological process called hormesis. It's real, and it works on everyone. Pressure. Now, the way they used to say it is now an enemy may be likened to water, for just as flowing water avoids the highs and hastens to the lowlands, so an army must avoid strength and strike weakness. And that, of course, is from the art of war. So it's always telling you, since time immemorial, there have been old things that have stayed true, and yet many more that have become false. But here's another thing that's true. Things like, here's a story. When I was in Japan, I was studying in a Zen temple for a little while, and all around me was a bamboo forest. And we would go and we would cut down these bamboo trees, and the next day there would have been a rainfall, and a bamboo shoot that had been this tall would have become this tall overnight. This is why bamboo is becoming the wood of the future, because it can grow faster. It can do more things than the rest of the trees will. So while other trees are being cut down and not replaced, bamboo is going, no problem. It doesn't have a problem at all because it can move faster, it can do more. So this used to be you, but now this needs to be you. Small pieces loosely joined. You can't be a huge monolith anymore. What you thought was true is now false, so you have to move to be able to find the food that you need. Here's a great example. These shoes, definitely the ugliest shoes you've ever seen, used to be a niche product. They're called the Vibram Five Fingers. A lot of people have them. They use them for what's called barefoot running. Because as it turns out, there's data that shows that the more expensive your running shoe is, the more you get injured if you're a runner. So if you wear Converse sneakers, you can actually get injured less. And as it turns out, these are super cheap too. If you buy a pair, they don't have any padding whatsoever, and they help. And now they're becoming a big market. Of course, Nike knows this, so now Nike is taking all its shoes, making them kind of barefooty with not a lot of padding. The whole world is moving in this direction, but someone had to start it. And that's the process that you want to be doing yourself because of the fact that you want to be able to be there at the beginning where all the profit is. So now, then I go through an airport the other week and I see this in the in-flight magazine, and I'm thinking, feel a skeletos. Most people copy. I don't want you to copy. I want you to evolve. Part 2. This guy. Anybody know this guy? Because that would be dangerous right now. This guy is incredibly good at a few things. Bodybuilders don't compete to look better to the likes of you and me. They compete to be able to be slightly bigger and slightly stronger than the next guy on the stage who's slightly more orange than they are. That's a fact. And they're good at it. And they know exactly how to become a little bit stronger, a little bit at a time. They train everything. They plan everything. They know exactly how many calories they eat. And in order to be able, the reason they do this is so they can win. But most of us aren't planning things this way. We have no idea what it is that's going to make us stronger or better. We just kind of learn as we go and try to figure it out as we go along. And we think we know best. So these guys actually become really good at one thing, which is competing on a stage or doing curls, and not so great at other things like moving their neck, right? Now, the question is, you have to become something, so what is it that you want to be? Do you want to become this guy, or do you want to become, instead, a highly adaptable animal? A specialized animal, or a highly adaptable one? This is Erwin LaCour. He started a movement called MoveNat, which is all about sort of learning to become fit by climbing trees and dealing with the natural environment. And I like to think about the human body in the same way that I think about fire, which is that you've got fire and you've got it in your hand, a little candle, and you'll grab it and you go, whoosh, and it goes out. So you might think, well, no, fire is a weak thing. It goes out instantaneously, but now let's think about this. A giant bonfire, and if we blow at that, what happens? The fire actually gets stronger. So Marcus Aurelius used to say this. He would say, become like fire in order to be able to use your obstacles as fuel, which is exactly what fire does. It takes the thing that is in front of it and stopping it, and it turns that thing into something that can make it stronger. So our problem is we don't have enough obstacles. We don't have enough things that are hard to do. We do what's easy. We try things only if we will succeed. We are uncomfortable with failure because it doesn't happen enough. And it doesn't happen enough because we don't seek the unknown. In other words, our prison is our own ideas. This is Bruce Lee. So sometimes you have to be given something outside of your own experience. And as a writer, I've written 3 books. I like to think about random input as being one of the best ways to do this. Now, what is random input? So this is a series of cards called oblique strategy cards. And Brian Eno came up with these cards. He did a lot of music work with David Bowie in the 70s, a very famous musician. But he also created the Windows sound. So when you turn on your computer, if you don't have a Mac, if you have a PC, that sound, Brian Eno made that sound. Amazing. Here's what else he made. These cards are called oblique strategy. And they deliberately give you confusing, weird sentences to think about to get you out of your own patterns. So they'll say things like, where's the edge? Where does the frame start? What the hell does this mean? But they say that to get you thinking. Here's another one. Do we need holes? Here's one I got the other week, because you can buy this as an iPhone app now for 99 cents. It said, what mistakes did you make last time? And I thought about that. Are there sections? Sometimes random input, sometimes stress is the best thing we could possibly have. It's very difficult to get. This is actually why flu shots work. They give you the disease. They're giving it to you. Here you go. Here's the disease inside of your body, exactly where it needs to proliferate, but in a small enough dose that you can absorb it and become resistant to the disease. So, in order to become stronger and better at something, put yourself right at the edge of that thing you need to become better at. Don't make it too easy, you'll get bored. Don't make it too hard, you will die. But just right means that it will work. You have to risk damage and do it more often. Another way to take a look at this is to think of a castle and think, great, a castle, what an amazing defense. What a great way to make sure that I stay alive. Unfortunately, that works and that stays true until an opposing army decides to surround you, you have no food, and you starve. Part 3. This guy is almost exactly like us. His brain is pretty much like 99% like our brain. So he's very good at some things and very bad at other things. So humans are very bad at calculating odds. So here's a great example. You would say something like, should you save for retirement? And everyone would be like, yeah, absolutely. And then, are you saving for retirement? And they'd be like, God damn, no, of course not. Why would I do that? We're bad at seeing the upside versus the downside. We see the risk but not the reward. We're bad at math, you know? When we make mistakes, there are 2 kinds of errors, but they're called false positives and false negatives. And a false positive is like you'd be out looking at your campfire and you'd be looking out in the darkness and you'd see a bear in the forest over there. And you'd be like, oh my God. So you approach and you just, oh no, that was just the shadows. It's just a bear. It's just the forest. It's not a big deal. There's no actual bear there. That's a false positive error. Those people stayed alive because they saw bears even when there weren't any. The other type is a false negative. False negative is when you look out into the forest from your little campfire and you look over there and you see the forest, but there's a bear and you don't see it. Those people died. So us, generations and generations later, the survivors became the people that saw risk where there were none. That's who we are today because of those people. So one of my mentors, Seth Godin, a very famous business writer, had this book called The Dip, and it's about the hard part. So here's the dip, and it's a graph. But I have a graph too. I just made it up, and I drew it, and I took a picture of it. That's how new it is. This is unbelievably bleeding edge, this stuff. So there's 2 kinds of curves that you can get on in life, okay? Most people get on the second curve. You can see it over there. Heading across the x-axis is time, and across the y-axis is pain. And how much pain you get over how much period of time. So most people get on the second curve because it's an easy curve to get on. It doesn't hurt to get on that curve. And every day, progressively, it gets maybe a little bit harder, but it's not really a big deal. And then you progressively get along the curve, and you're like, well, this is hurting a little bit more, but I'm actually going to get, it's becoming easier and easier. I'll be okay. And then eventually, the curve gets so insane that you are at a level of pain you can no longer handle. I like to call this Chinese water torture. Sounds easy, but it's actually damn hard. Now let's look at the second graph, the opposite. The first one at the top, you get on it and it hurts right away, but then the pain levels off. No big deal once you're there, but nobody goes because it hurts when you start. And our brain is telling us pain equals death, which is not true anymore, but it feels true. Your hindbrain is telling you it's true. So, the second one may be Chinese water torture. I like to call the first graph the flinch. And the flinch is like getting into a cold shower. Oh my God. Or jumping into a cold pool. It feels like it's going to get really bad, but then actually it's fine. And the pain level's off. But most people never get on that curve. I like to think of our brain as being a little bit like a malfunctioning alarm system for this very reason. We think that we are doing the right thing, but our brain is actually working against us because it was designed for an environment where nothing changes, where everything is always the same. So we are no longer getting what we need out of our own nervous system for the most part. And then, so great way to think about this is to think about life instead as being like a boxing ring. It's a limited amount of damage, can't really die, limited amount of time, hurts like hell, but when you go inside, you could be a champion if you try. So I said that there were 3 parts to this. I actually lied. There are 4. Homework. Simple things. Choose the right curve and build the courage to handle it. Discover your own ignorance. Get dirty as you can, as often as you can. It helps actually fight germs, counterintuitively. Gather data about the unknown. Become very familiar with this phrase. I don't know, but I'm willing to find out. Act on the inevitable immediately. If you see trends happening, if you see things that are going to happen, don't wait. Do something about it now, because others will see it later, but they don't. Now is the time. Disrupt your thinking on purpose. Disrupt your industry on purpose. One of my favorite phrases, Steve Jobs, if we don't cannibalize ourselves, somebody else will. He's talking about the iPod being replaced by the iPhone. In other words, the pressure is good for you. Talk minus action equals shit. Reality doesn't care what you think. You have to adapt to survive. Thanks.